right, what's up, everyone? Levi here, and today we're talking about a corruption case that just wrapped up in Ohio. So East Cleveland Mayor Brandon King and former city council member Ernest Smith were both found guilty on multiple corruption charges just a few weeks ago. This case has everything: family businesses getting city contracts, misuse of city vehicles, and officials who thought that the rules did not apply to them.
The East Cleveland mayor indicted on felony theft in office and other charges. Happened late this afternoon.
So first, let's talk about who we're dealing with. Brandon King became the mayor of East Cleveland in 2017, but he had been city council since 2014. Ernest Smith was a city council member who apparently thought a city car was his own personal vehicle. But we'll get more into that later. Now, East Cleveland isn't a big city. We're talking about a small community in Ohio. But corruption is corruption, whether it's a small town or major city. And this case shows you exactly how these schemes work at the local level. The prosecution was handled by the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office, and the investigation involved both the Ohio Ethics Commission and the Ohio State Auditor's Office. These weren't partisan political attacks. These were legitimate government oversight agencies doing their jobs, doing what they're supposed to be doing. So let's start with Mayor King's scheme, because this one is pretty brazen. King was found guilty of 10 corruption-related charges, including theft in office and having an unlawful interest in a public contract. So here's how it worked. King's family owned two businesses: King Management Group, or KMG, and American Merchandising Services, or AMS. Both of these companies were started by King's father and owned by the King family. Now, here is where things get interesting. The city's domestic violence program was renting office space in a building owned by KMG. This arrangement actually started back in 1999, which was long before King was in office. So far, legitimate, am I right? But this is where things take a turn for the worst. Once King became mayor, he had direct influence over city contracts and spending. The domestic violence office was paying more than $14,000 a year to KMG for this office space. When city council tried to end this lease in 2024, King actually vetoed it. That is a mayor using his office power to protect his family's business interests. Then there is American Merchandising Services. Between 2019 and 2022, the city purchased about $6,000 worth of supplies from AMS. Again, we're talking about a company owned by the mayor's family getting city contracts while he is in office. Now, King's defense tried to argue that he never personally signed off on the AMS purchases and that the domestic violence office lease was paid for with the state grant money, not city money, so it shouldn't count as public contract. But here is what the Ohio Ethics Commission's deputy director testified to. Grant money is public money. Just like the money from a city's general fund, the ethics laws apply to both. It doesn't matter if it comes from the state or the city. It's still taxpayer money. And multiple witnesses testified that they couldn't find any record of city council ever voting to apply for or accept the grant that funded the domestic violence unit. That is a red flag right there. Now, let's talk about Ernest Smith. His scheme was a lot more simple, but just as corrupt. Smith was found guilty of 5 charges related to his use of a city-owned vehicle, including theft in office. Here's what happened. Smith was driving around a city car like it was his own personal vehicle. An activist actually took a photo of the city car parked in Smith's driveway, which is what sparked the investigation to begin with. The city council passed a resolution calling for the car to be taken away from Smith. King, the mayor, vetoed that resolution too. So you've got the mayor protecting another corrupt official. During the trial, Smith claimed he was using the car for city business, things like escorting children to school and delivering free meals and clothing to the community members. You know, a real noble guy, right? But here is what the problem is. Smith could not provide any records of how he used the car or what justified about 3,000 gallons in gas purchases on a city credit card. But perhaps the city prosecutor put it perfectly. He said, quote, he decided what city business was whenever he wanted to drive that car. Both defendants' attorneys tried to claim that this was all politically motivated, that it was all just petty rivalries and political vendettas by city council members and activists. But here's the thing. The investigations didn't start with politicians trying to take down their enemies. agencies. They started with legitimate complaints to proper oversight agencies, which would be the Ohio Ethics Commission and the state auditor's office. They investigated complaints based on council members and activists who saw something wrong and reported it through the proper channels. That's exactly how the system is supposed to work. When citizens see potential corruption, they report it to oversight agencies. Those agencies investigate, and if they find evidence of wrongdoing, prosecutors bring charges. The jury deliberated for about a week after hearing testimony from inspectors with the Ohio Ethics Commission, the Ohio State Auditor's Office, and former city council members and officials. This wasn't a rush to judgment. They heard all of the evidence in this matter. And in the end, the jury found King guilty on 10 charges and Smith guilty on 5 charges. Now, you might be thinking, we're talking about $6,000 in supplies and $14,000 a year in rent. This isn't exactly the crime of the century. The prosecutor addressed this directly during closing arguments. He said the dollar amounts weren't very substantial, but the case was still very important because, quote, this case is about disregard, disdain for the rule of law, separation of powers, and the way things are supposed to work. And that is exactly right. Corruption isn't just about the dollar amount. It's about public officials thinking that they are above the law. It's about using your position of trust to benefit yourself or enrich your family. It's about the basic principle that public office is supposed to serve the public, not your own personal interests. When mayors can steer contracts to their family businesses and council members can treat city property as their personal property, that breaks down the entire system of government. It doesn't matter if it's $6,000 or $6 million. The principle is still the same. So what happened next? Well, both King and Smith got their sentences in July 2025, and honestly, they got off pretty easy, let me tell you. Brandon King was sentenced to 3 years of probation and 100 hours of community service. He has to pay $27,000 in restitution and is permanently banned from serving in any elected positions. That's right, he is forever disqualified from any public office. Ernest Smith got 3 years of probation too, and he has to pay back the $6,791 he stole from taxpayers for his gas expenses, plus another $6,416 for the cost of the audit. Smith is disqualified also from public service for 7 years. Now, some people might think these sentences are too light, no jail time for either of them. Well, King was facing up to 54 months in prison, Smith up to 18 months, but they both avoided prison entirely. That's the reality of how these corruption cases often play out at the local level. That's it for today. Let me know your comments below. Let me know what you think about this whole situation, and if you want to see more government accountability content just like this, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching. Levi, Trumbull reporting in Frederick, and we'll catch you soon.